My name is Skip Rutherford. I am Dean of the Clinton School, and we are going to have a very fun noon hour today. A few weeks ago, I was at a reception. We were at a reception, and I had heard of Jeanne Hamilton, but I had never had a long conversation with her. And at this event, she captivated me with her stories, not only about the arts and the Arts Center, but about Little Rock and life. And Todd was there, and I said, look, we just got to get Jeanne at the Clinton School to tell these stories. She met Jim Hamilton in Indianapolis when he was at Fort Benjamin Harrison. They moved to Little Rock. In 1956, the junior, no, I'm not talking about when you moved here, I'm talking about what happened. I know you moved here in 52. This is why this conversation is going to be really good. You should have heard her back at lunch. In 1956, the Junior League had a program about students and speaking, a community speaking program, and they speech corrections. They changed their motivation to the arts, and the arts chairman of the Junior League was a young lady by the name of Jeanne Hamilton. And it began a almost 60-year association with the arts and with the Arts Center. She was president of the Community Arts Center. She served 17 years on the Arts Center board. She's an honorary lifetime trustee of the Arts Center. In 1964-65, 50 years ago, she was president of the Junior League of Little Rock. She was instrumental, along with other people, in getting the Arts Center started and funded. She has been head of every Arts Center thing, including Tabriz, so it wasn't Tabriz when she headed, and she will correct me and tell you that. She has won the honorary lifetime arts awards, and she remains as committed to the future of the Arts Center today as when she started in 1957. In March of 2016, she will celebrate her 90th birthday. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeanne Hamilton to the Clinton School.
Thank you.
All right. You came to Little Rock in 1952.
Correct.
Tell us about how you got involved with the Arts Center.
Well, I was a member of the Junior League, and when Carrie Dickinson was president, she asked me to be the arts chairman on her board. And the rest is history, really, because at that time, the Museum of Fine Arts had a director, Mrs. Robinson, who had been there for 20 years, and she was 80 years old, and she was retiring. And so there was nobody to keep the doors open out of the old museum. The two employees were Mrs. Robinson and Grady, the black janitor. And so they called the Junior League and said, we need help. We need someone to come and keep the doors open. Well, as arts chairman, it felt as my job. They gave me the key, and we got volunteers to go every day. I think we worked from 10 to 2 or 11 to 2, something like that. But that is how I first became involved with the arts.
Okay, so then you and some of your colleagues got involved in raising money to hopefully build a new arts center, and in doing that, largely led by women that led the effort, someone came up with the idea or the suggestion that you contact the Winthrop Rockefeller, who had just moved to Arkansas, before he launched the political career. Tell about reaching out to Governor Rockefeller, or then Mr. Rockefeller.
We had formed a benevolent corporation to raise money to create a community arts center. And we had finally gotten permission from an appeals review board to raise $200,000 in Pulaski County from June of '59 to June of '60. And we needed a chairman for this. So we thought, why not think big? Wynn had just recently purchased Windrock property and was in the process of putting the farm together. He had just married Jeanette. And so we needed a chairman for this fundraising campaign. And so we called and asked if we could make an appointment with Winthrop, and they invited us up for Sunday brunch. And Carrie Dickinson, Marilyn McCaney, and I went up to Windrock with all of our little notes and everything to present our ideas. And when we got there, we visited with Wynn and so forth, and we told him what we wanted to do, and that it was a local activity. And he said, well, girls, we asked him if he'd be chairman at first. He said, I will not be your chairman for your local campaign, but if we're going to build an art center, it needs to be for the whole state of Arkansas. He said, I'll help you get a chairman for your local campaign, and then after we raise that $200,000, we'll go around the state and raise more money. Well, the rest is history. We did.
So how did you raise the local $200,000? How'd you get that done?
Well, the Junior League was the kind of the responsible party. It was our project. We and our husbands, and some of you are here today who were involved in that, we went up and down Main Street and all around, and we asked people for money, and we took $5, $10, $25 checks and more, and we raised that money.
Jeanne, when you were doing that, it was a very difficult time in the city. The schools were closed. So how did that work when a lot of people were very discouraged about Little Rock's future? How did you all take on the?
Well, you know, I think it really was a positive thing, because it was a positive thing that we were trying to do, and it kind of took the major thing off of the problems we were having. It was a time that it's hard to even explain it. Those of you who were here remember it, but we went out and it happened.
Do you think that when Rockefeller at the time saw that as an opportunity to show the world that Arkansas was more than school closings, that it was about culture and arts?
Well, I do know that we could never have done it without Wynn, and he had not stepped out into the community at all at that point. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that after we raised that $200,000, then it was time, because he said we've got to do this in the state. And he invited we had 5 banking districts at that point, and he invited the chairman of the 5 banking districts to come to a brunch up at Windrock, and had me and some other people that were involved in this project. And we gave them the pitch about we were going to build this art center, and we were going to have an artmobile. I forgot to tell you, back when Carrie and Marilyn and I went up that day, and he mentioned the fact that it needed to be an Arkansas art center, he said, well, girls, you know that those guys in Virginia have this thing called an artmobile, and it travels the state and takes the museum all over the state. He said, we'll have an artmobile. Well, that was the beginning of that. But anyway, when we had the 5 heads of the banking districts, we told them about the artmobile and so forth. And he asked them to go around home and set up breakfast, lunch, and dinner meetings so we could come and tell them the idea about this, which they all did. And then we traveled to these various places, and if they had a little airstrip, we'd go in the little plane Wynn had, but if they didn't, we drove. And kids put nickels and dimes in fruit jars, and people came forth. It was really a remarkable experience, because it was the first time that Wynn had an opportunity to get out really in the entire state, and everybody out there was so happy to be a part of all this. So the rest is really kind of history, but that was it.
Okay, and then after so let's talk about the Art Center opening, and then talk about your involvement with what is now Tabriz.
Well, the Art Center opening was really a big deal. That was in May of 1963, and Jean Gordon right there remembers it all, because we were co-chairman of the opening, the Beaux-Arts Ball. And of course, it was all being financed by the Rockefellers. And they had Henry King and his orchestra come, and we had a big tent out in the parking lot where that was. We had Dave Brubeck and his group in the theater. We had Gordon McRae for a press conference. It was big-time stuff. Joan Fontaine was here, a guest, and Charles Adams, the cartoonist, was here. And it was just, well, the newspapers were all covering it. I mean, we had the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, which was an international newspaper, covered it. And it was big-time stuff, and we had a good time. And we also had an exhibition from the Metropolitan Museum. And of course, James Rorimer was here. He was the director of the Met. But we had 5 centuries of European art, which was a fantastic collection of unbelievable art that was all hanging in the new galleries at the Art Center. So Little Rock, or Arkansas, had never seen anything quite like this, but that was the grand opening of the Art Center.
And then after it opened, for the next 4 or 5 years, there were some struggles. There were some financial struggles. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Big time struggles, because at that point, some of the people that had been hired in the various departments got the idea that it would be good to have a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, which did begin, and there were students here with this BFA program, but it was costing a lot of money, and the Rockefellers were underwriting the entire thing. And that just was not as it should be. And so we finally realized that, well, during this, I forgot to go back, because when we had, before the BFA program, we had started classes for adults and children and everything. And at one point, the Junior League had underwritten the salary for 3 years for a director of education, Mrs. Ann Webb. And she started all these programs in the old upstairs of the old museum before we had the building built. So we had something to move into the classrooms when we got it built. And in the process, we didn't have anyone to teach a painting class. And she had gone over to Memphis, to the Memphis Academy, and found a young man named Townsend Wolfe, and arranged for him to come over 2 times a month and teach a painting class. So that was kind of where Townsend first came into the act, which was, but when we took the BFA program apart, Mr. Sam Strauss and I had a press conference and explained that we were cutting back to the bone because it was no longer intelligent to have one family supporting the entire thing financially. And that's when we got rid of the BFA program. We even closed the dining room because it wasn't making money. We kept the gift shop open because it was making money. And the rest is history, but we went back to the bone and started from scratch again.
So it's fair to say that the Rockefeller family was instrumental not only in opening the Art Center, but in keeping it open during.
Right. After this reorganization, they matched all the funds that we did, and it was a more appropriate thing. The city, we had the funds from that source, and that we instigated ourselves, and then the Rockefellers matched those funds, and that's how we kept the Art Center going after this big debacle of getting rid of the BFA program.
Now, you've had your fingerprints on everything Art Center for the last 60 years, but one of the things that is notable was you all helped organize this thing called the Traveling Symposium.
Traveling Seminar Program.
Tell us about that. I told you.
Well, this was back in 1972, and I see Fred Poe sitting there, and we had 4 girls had gone to Europe in 1963 on $1,000 apiece and flew Icelandic Airlines and all that kind of got my feet wet, and I was ready to do something else. But anyway, in 1972, we started a program where we studied for a month before we went, and we had people knowledgeable about the arts where we were going to talk to us, and then we traveled. We went to Florence on the first trip. And as we progressed to 1975, we thought, you know, nobody's getting in China these days. So we wrote the People's Republic of China and said we're a small cultural group in the central part of the United States, and we would like to take a trip to China. And we got a letter back and said, send a proposed list of travelers with autobiographical information. Well, we sent letters out to the Art Center members, and you can imagine a bunch of people. We said, send $200, and if you're not accepted, it will be refundable. Well, we got a bunch of requests, and the Chinese accepted there were about 18 of us. I think Fred went, and I don't know how many, but anyway, it was a small group. But we traveled in China when Mao was still alive. It was really quite an interesting experience.
You went to China shortly after Nixon went to China.
Well, whenever he went, we went.
Okay. All right. So your seminar went on, and then in 2002, where did you go?
We went to Cuba.
2002.
Nobody was getting in Cuba then, and we had to fly in a private plane because they weren't, airlines weren't allowed to go. But it was fascinating because Cuba was, well, it was not very advanced. It was just in terrible shape. There were no cars, just antique things, but we got to visited a lot of artists, which was really fascinating. They were doing interesting things, but they could not get their things out of Cuba, and we all managed to bring a few things back, and it was really quite an experience. And one night, the guides, every place we went, we were accompanied by all kinds of guardians, but anyway, the head guardian said, Jeane, there's going to be something interesting happening at the Grand Palais tonight. There's a new show opening. Would you think any of your people would like to go? And not everyone, but 5 or 6 of us did go. And when we got there, we were not seated together. We were just seated randomly throughout the audience. And just before the curtain went up, oh, I forgot to tell you, when we got there, there were guys in barricades, guys with guns all around. It was all being very heavily secured, and we thought, well, somebody important's going to be there, but who? Well, anyway, just before the curtain went up, Fidel walked in, and he happened to be sitting in a box right above where my seat was, and I got a good picture of him. He had on a navy blue suit and was all dressed up, and it was quite an interesting thing.
So with this Artmobile that traveled Arkansas, and with this symposium or seminar that traveled the world, you have been instrumental in taking Arkansas and art everywhere. But when you did the Tabriz and all this stuff, tell them, there are 2 stories about you that people talk about. Now, and both of them are about hats. So there are 2 hat stories, and I think you know the 2 I'm referring to because I've asked you about them 3 times.
Well,
so I won't ask you about them. I'll let you tell your 2 hat stories and any other hat stories you want to tell.
The first hat story was the first Mozart Ball, which was in the old upstairs of the old Little Rock Country Club, which no longer exists. But the theme was the Garden of Versailles. And so my husband and I decided that we would go as Marie Antoinette after she lost her head. And at that point, the M.M. Cohen department store had a display department, and we were able to get from their display department a shoulder with a head on it, mannequin that they used in the hat department. And we cut the head off at the neck and made a Madame Pompadour wig to put on it. And my husband got a black, he was the axeman who had decapitated Marie Antoinette. Anyway, we went as Marie Antoinette and her executioner, and we won first prize.
Oh, that's a good one, but wait till you hear the second hat story.
Well, now, the second story, I have a co-worker here, Jean Gordon, because it was just before the Art Center was getting ready to be built, and this event was down at the old convention center downtown. Anyway, Robinson Auditorium, I think that's where it was. And so Jean and Frank and Jim and I got together, and we built the Art Center. and we put it on our heads. It was a huge thing in 4 sections where when it all fit together, we put it up on our heads and we had to walk in unison. But we won the prize that night too.
She goes as no head one time, and then as the art center the second time, and wins first place every time. Okay, now, you have seen the art center evolve. You've seen the collections evolve and all this stuff. Today, there's a great debate about the future of the art center and the role it plays. Would you talk about where you see the art center is and where you see it going?
Well, I love where it is in MacArthur Park, and that's where I'd like for it to stay.
That's a pretty strong endorsement from MacArthur Park.
And I just want the Art Center to continue to be a Little Rock event, not event, but a Little Rock thing. It is the history of Little Rock, and many of you sitting here today have been a part of that history. And I am really very desirous of having it go on, and everybody support the Art Center, as many groups have done and are doing, and many of you have been active in those groups and as individuals. And it's just an opportunity to go on and grow and meet the community's needs as we have done for the last 50 years and march forward. So it's up to all of us to just work together and make it happen.
The Artmobile went to 43 counties last year in Arkansas. It was something that she and others had a vision for many years ago. And when you think about the people that have traveled the world and the world exhibits that have come over the years, over these 60 years, everything traces back, Jean Gordon, but everything traces back to a group of dedicated, talented women who saw culture as a way to build Little Rock. So, Jean, we're going to throw it open to questions or comments so that others will have their time with you, because I could dominate this for the next 2 hours, and I won't. So does anyone have any comments or questions or Jean stories you'd like to raise? Yes, and please wait for your microphone so we can get this recorded.
Jean?
He'll come on.
Is it on?
Oh.
I want you to talk about your relationship with Townsend Wolfe, because it's such a beautiful relationship, and you were responsible for hiring him, were you not?
I was chairman of the personnel committee that hired him. Oh, no, well, it was really interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, Ann Webb had gone over to Memphis and had found Townsend and brought him over here to teach art classes. And that's where I first got to know Townsend. And after he left the Memphis Academy where he was teaching, he moved over to the East Coast, and he was in the Art Students League class with Will Barnett. And anyway, at the point that we had gone through this terrible upheaval with the BFA program folding and all of that, we needed to re-establish the activities within the art department at the Art Center. And we remembered him as being part of the program. And Jeanette Rockefeller, well, Wynn was governor by now, and Jeanette was the president of the Art Center board. And as I said, I was chairman of the personnel committee. And they were talking about we needed a director of education, and some of the people on the board thought of Townsend as would be good to call and see if he'd like to come and be the director of education. Well, unbeknownst to them, Townsend had bigger ideas than that. And we called Townsend and asked him to come and discuss the possibility of returning to the Art Center in some position. And when he came, Jeanette and he and I met in the upstairs of the governor's mansion. If any of you have ever been up that stairwell, at the top is a small room, and that's where Wynn and Jeanette spent a lot of their private time. And so Jeanette and Townsend and I sat down up there, and it became apparent immediately that Townsend was not interested in the director of education job. He wanted the director's job. Well, that put a whole new view on things, so I went home and I called the other members of the personnel committee and the board, and the next day we met again, but this time downstairs in that large meeting room behind the living room at the mansion, and Townsend said he would like to apply for the job of director. And I don't know whether any of you have ever known Billy Rector, but he was there, and Billy said, "Young man, why do you think you can do this job?" And Townsend said, "I am too young to fail." And the rest is history.
Good question. Yes, sir. Wait for the microphone, please.
Sometime in the last year, two things have come out in the paper. One was that the collection may move and go to North Little Rock, and the other was about restoration of the building. Could you talk about those two issues?
Well, the issue of moving to North Little Rock, I have been violently opposed to from the time it came forward. You just heard about what Little Rock has gone through to create the Arkansas Arts Center and to make it part of our community. So I'm hoping that, as you all read in the paper, I think it was Wednesday morning, was it, that the city board has come up with a nice additional amount for our support of the building is old. The building needs a great deal done to it, and in order for accreditation to occur, much has to be done, and money has to come to take care of that. And so I think we're all going to have to pull together, as we've done in the past, and make this happen to keep it in Little Rock. And what was the other part of your question? Was there another part of your question?
What restoration is needed to the building?
The vaults where the permanent collection is kept, it is not up to par at all, and we probably could not get the necessary accreditation unless we completely do. There are all kinds of things. The building is old, and it needs a lot done to it. I'm sorry I'm not the architect and all that, but I do know.
Bill, right here.
The collections, of course, are crucial to any museum. What did you think about Townsend's commitment to original works of art on paper, and what are your favorite pieces in the collection?
Well, it was a brilliant idea, and we have put together one of the finest collections on paper any place. And when when the Seignac collection that Jim Dyke has done so much to bring forth, when that had the opening in Paris, a group of us from the Arkansas Arts Center went to Paris and were there for that grand opening, which was quite an event. And I think that it's just remarkable that we have pursued that. It's a unique thing, really, and it's the top of the line. And I couldn't say that I have any one special thing, but I am really very, very impressed with the whole thing. There's a Milton Avery that I love, and some other things, but that's inconsequential. But one thing about part of the collection that I think is interesting, the Diego Rivera that the Rockefeller family gave to us, after that came a long time ago, but when James Rorimer was here for the opening, he walked up to that and said to me, "You should not have that painting. The Met should have gotten that."
Okay, do you have your hand up? Do you have your hand up, Kelly?
No, I don't know the answer to some of these things, and I think Todd would have a better answer than I could give.
Which question would you like me to answer first?
The renovation, what needs, give us,
Well, the renovation of the Arts Center is kind of multifaceted. As Jeanne has already said, it's an old building, and the Arts Center you see today is actually built around the original 1937 building, and the HVAC systems are all kind of linked together from numerous construction projects. And storage is an issue. Our visitor services areas are an issue. It needs an overall renovation and an expansion. As the Art Center grows, and as we serve more people, we need to have a facility that that inspires people, that you come to the Art Center and you're inspired by creative thinking, that it's a hub where people can come and just kind of experience that, a multifaceted array of cultural joy. And then really that's what an art center does, is it allows us all to tap into that part of us that we all have, right? I mean, we all love singing and dancing, and we draw, we take photographs, do all kinds of things that appeal to the aesthetic side of us. And that's what an art center is there to do, is to be a place that encourages that in all of us. Because once we lose it, once we lose our cultural literacy, once we lose our cultural identity, we've lost a lot. And you know that there are some world monuments that have recently been kind of bulldozed and destroyed. And there's a reason why they're doing those things, because they know that a collective kind of cultural identity, once you destroy that, you destroy a part of all of us. Culture is what links all of us together worldwide. And so an art center is very important, and the facility that it's in is very important so it can deliver all the wonderful programs that we currently do that we can expand.
Thank you. Question? Yes, ma'am, right here.
Jeane, first of all, hey,
I
Carol
couldn't see
Porter.
who it was.
First of all, where is your fountain of youth? I just want to know the secret to your
Where's your fountain of youth?
Keep going.
I'm going to tell a little story back in 1977 when I actually worked at the Art Center and did the PR right after Ann King Crow left. And I was sitting right across from Townsend, and I would see you come in every day and, visit and visit. And so the side of the Art Center I got in the beginning at 25, now y'all know how old I am, was amazing. It was alive. There was so much going on. It was the Art Center, the theater, the museum classes, the photography classes, the travel, everything was there. Then we moved to Memphis for my husband to do a residency. And so I went to the Brooks Museum, and I said, so where's your art mobile? And where's your photography museum classes? And having over the years been to many, many places in the United States, the thing I said every time was, but the Arkansas Art Center is really alive. It's living. It's not like, let's just go look at these paintings and go home. So wherever it is and whatever happens to it, you are one of the best examples of how it has kept its heart beating, has its future bright, and I know that we're all going to work on the same page, and I thank you for carrying it on, and everybody else.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say, though, as I mentioned before, none of this could happen without the group effort and the individual effort on everybody's part, because I think that has been the key strength of this institution. We've just had a huge number of folks who have been dedicated to this and have remained so.
Yes.
What's been the effect of Crystal Bridges on the Arkansas Art Center?
Crystal Bridges is just wonderful. And I wish that the Art Center could unite in some way with Crystal Bridges and we could have some joint things together. I think that would be great.
Yeah, we have a question right here, and then we'll come up there.
Hi, Jeane, it's Beverly.
Oh, hi, Beverly.
Didn't you tell me one time that you all, when you did the first, either the Beaux-Arts Ball or what used to be Tabriz, that you all were the first ones to do a silent auction at a party like that? Tell us about that.
In Little Rock, we were the first to do that. This had been done down, I think, in Mississippi or Louisiana, someplace down there, and we got involved with we asked them to come and tell us about how it went, and they gave us the idea of a silent auction and all of things like that, and that was the first auction that Arkansas had ever heard of when we had the first Tabriz. And just look, everybody in town does it now, but that was the very first one.
Yes, Patrick, right. Yeah, we'll get some.
Here I am. One of the gems of the Art Center is the Children's Theater, I think, bringing a lot of kids and families in who wouldn't otherwise come. How did the Children's Theater get started? Was it part of the original Art Center concept, and what was the thinking behind?
That is interesting, an interesting question, because when we brought these people in that started that BFA program, we had Robert Barnes came, and he started a program for children, and my kids were in it, and they did little productions, and it was very active. They had little classes in the theater and so forth, and what is now the Children's Theater grew out of that, and it has retained, huge. I love going to the Art Center and seeing 18 or 20 yellow school buses all out in the parking lot, and I try to go in the door, and you can hardly get through because all those kids are sitting waiting to get into the theater for the productions that are there. That has been an ongoing. It did not die when a lot of other things did.
John, up here from the balcony.
Quick question. I do not know anyone who has traveled the world as much as Jeanne Hamilton. And what I think is so exciting is that Jeanne has done an incredible job of chronicling that information and preparing albums with pictures and other interesting stories from her travels. It's my understanding, Jeanne, that at some point you were going to turn those albums over so that they can be maintained and made available for people in years to come. Where are you going to have those housed? And also the second question is, do you know how many countries you've actually had the opportunity to visit?
Well, first answer, Deborah Baldwin came to me a few years ago and asked me to sign all of those books over to the library. And I did, and my daughter has signed that. So when I don't want to give them up now because I love to go back and review things that I've done, but they are all going to the library. And they've taken me down there and showed me where they're going to keep them. In fact, I think they're going to put them next to all Winthrop Rockefeller stuff down there. So that's where they're going. And what was the second question?
How many countries have you been to?
Oh, well, I've been to every continent, including Antarctica, and I don't remember how many countries in between, but we have been to Afghanistan, Iran, Tibet, you name it, we've done it. And Fred Poe has been the responsible party who has gotten us there, and I brought them all back alive, too.
Well, yes, go ahead. One question right here. One more question.
My name is Stacy Coxon. I'm a first-year student here at the Clinton School. First, I just want to say thank you for coming. It's been very interesting to hear you speak. As a part of a project, I'm with a team, and we've recently been doing some research on the benefits of having art in communities. And as someone who has spent so many years supporting and promoting the arts, I would love to know your opinion on what are some of the benefits of having art in a community.
Well, I would say the benefits are infinite. I don't think there's any way you can just really outline it, but we have just opened up a whole new avenue of thought to all of these young people that have been able to come to the Art Center through the years, and some of those who have come have become active in the community and supporting all the arts. And it's really been just a fascinating experience to see the broadness of just the exposure to all of the various arts, and the results are infinite.
And the tourism dollars have been, over the years, have been.
I hadn't thought of, I'm glad you mentioned that.
For once I get ahead of you, which is pretty good. Well, let me say that, you can see I've had so much fun. I've been having fun getting ready for this. What she's done, I think, is one of the most remarkable stories in Little Rock's history. And I think when the history is written of this time, about particularly the arts and the culture, her name is going to be at the top of that list. But there's also another name, and someone that I want to introduce here, because there's someone whose family has really changed this state for the better and continues to do that. and that is my friend Lisa Ann Rockefeller is here. Lisa Ann, thank you for being here.
Oh.
And at the risk of getting myself in very political hot water, Jeane, you may have the opportunity to vote for another young Rockefeller because there's a young man named Will that's got a great future in this state. Just keep
I've
your eyes.
already said that to his mother and to him.
Told you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Let's give Jeanne Hamilton a round of applause.